about the Iran war. What do you make of that? Are you
from
now
Anna.
with
Full
Tucker
support,
Carlson?
100%. Full support, 100%.
I wouldn't say I'm with anyone politically. I think people are complicated and they hold various positions, some of which I agree with, others I disagree with. In regard to Trump's take on the war with Iran, his commentary in regard to the detrimental impact of the U.S. alliance with Israel, I wholeheartedly agree with him. I've been agreeing with him. And I think that when someone says that they were wrong about anything, whether it's a political candidate or particular political issue, when they admit that they were wrong and they apologize for it, we should normalize providing positive reinforcement for that. We should create the kind of culture that rewards people who are willing to admit they were wrong.
Wow. So brave.
Clay Travis, welcome back to Uncensored. It was good to see you. Polymarket on the US and Iran permanent peace deal reckon there'll be one by April the 30th, 20% likelihood of it being done by April 30th. I've got to say, I find this highly unlikely. I mean, I look at this current quagmire. I'm really struggling to see how Donald Trump extricates himself quickly in a way that gives him any kind of convincing victory lap. And I just sense that his constant changing of rhetoric and positioning and so on indicates that he is really wrestling with how to do this in a way that works. How are you feeling about it? I mean, are you comfortable with the way this is all playing out?
I think we can see a pathway to, first of all, thanks for having me back on. And I think we can see a pathway to success here, but it requires that Iran gets something and that the United States gets something, as all negotiations require. And so what I would say the United States most wants is the so-called nuclear dust from Iran in some way in our possession, removed from that country.
Was this a term that was used before Trump said nuclear dust? Is this a thing we say? I've never heard this before, nuclear dust, but I don't know.
And the Strait of Hormuz, fully ending the blockade and also ending any threats to ships there. I would say that's the two things the U.S. is most focused on right now. I would say the two things that Iran needs is they want their money unfrozen, the assets there. They want the ability to get that removed. And I think they also want for, in some way, the political power that exists now to be recognized as a group that is worthy of negotiation with. And I think the biggest hang up right now, based on everything that I'm hearing, is there is an internal discord between the negotiators and the IRGC over who actually...
Google says Trump is the origin? Okay.
Is in control in Iran. And remember, we still haven't seen at all in any way, even audio, certainly not video, of the Ayatollah who has been elevated, the son of the killed Ayatollah. So I think the challenge is here, who are you negotiating with and who has authority to enter into any sort of deal with Iran? But to me, that seems like a framework where Iran would get two things, the United States would get two things, and we could go back and see how well the relationship is going to play out here. I would say Venezuela is a good model, Piers. We hear nothing at all about Venezuela right now. It seems the country has stabilized. Delcy Rodriguez in many ways working with the United States. I think what the Trump administration is looking for is who are the leaders of Iran and can we trust and negotiate with them? And that is the biggest challenge to getting peace right now.
Josh Rogin, welcome back to you as well. You shared an ex-post yesterday from an Iranian national security analyst that said Trump's ceasefire extension means nothing. The losing side cannot dictate terms. The continuation of the siege is no different from bombardment and must be met with a military response. Moreover, Trump's ceasefire extension is certainly a ploy to buy more time for a surprise strike. The time for Iran to take the initiative has come. Now, that may be just more bellicose rhetoric, but it seems to me, and as it has done from the moment they shut the Strait of Hormuz, that we've been witnessing a very asymmetric war here. There's been a military war of a conventional kind, which America and Israel have been pretty successful at so far. But there's also been a war over a waterway, which has been highly effective for the Iranians in causing enormous economic and therefore political damage to America, I think in particular. And of course, there's been the constant attacks on the neighboring Gulf states, which have caused them enormous difficulties, which have presented a big, big blow to their future business model, which has been developed in the last few years of moving from oil to tourism and selling sun and safety in particular and having entertainment and sport and so on. That's all been put on hold. And what you're seeing, a lot of people leaving because of what's happened. So there's been a lot going on here. One's been a conventional military war and one has been a war over the Strait of Hormuz. The problem, it seems to me, for Donald Trump is that he doesn't quite know what to do about either of those things. I mean, if they were to now attack again in Iran and attack, for argument's sake, oil refineries or desalination plants or whatever, well, the Iranians have made it crystal clear they would do exactly the same thing immediately to their neighboring Gulf states. And that could be, in some instances, extremely damaging, particularly the desalination plants. So where do you think we are with this and how does this play out?
Right. Piers, I agree with your framing, except for one small detail. It's all the same war. The Strait of Hormuz, the attack on our Gulf allies by the Iranians, the conventional attacks by the U.S. and Israel and Iran, it's all the same conflict. They're just different tools being used by different actors in that same conflict, and of course, they're all related. And now we're almost 2 months into this thing, and what do we know for sure? Well,
is this guy pro-Trump dick suck or something else? I feel like when I hear that term, it's all the same war. It feels like when I hear somebody say that, it feels like what they're saying is that like we have really good justifications for the first war, but we don't have any justifications for the second war. So we're just going to say that both these wars are the same war so that we can justify all of our actions in the second one because we know that the first one was justified. That's what it sounds like, but I don't know. I don't like that.
We know a couple of things. We know that the Trump administration's theory of the case, which is that this would be a short war, regime change, a Venezuela type agreement with whoever was left standing was wrong. They had, for whatever reason, either they were misled or misled themselves, got into this with completely wrong expectations about how the Iranians would react, what their capabilities would be. And the way that we know this is because President Trump says it all the time. He's admitted on several occasions. He was...
Wait, this guy super sounds like Marco Rubio. Wait, that's not what he's saying? Wait, did I misunderstand him? Hold on.
In some instances, extremely damaging, particularly the desalination plants. So where do you think we are with this, and how does this play out?
Right. Piers, I agree with your framing, except for one small detail. It's all the same war. The Strait of Hormuz, the attack on our Gulf.
That's all been put on hold, and what you're seeing, a lot of people leaving because of what's happened. So there's been a lot going on here. One's been a conventional military war, and one has been a war over the Strait of Hormuz. The problem, it seems to me, for Donald Trump is that he doesn't quite know what to do about either of those things. I mean, if they were to now attack again in Iran and attack, for argument's sake, oil refineries or desalination plants or whatever, well, the Iranians have made it crystal clear they would do exactly the same thing immediately to their neighboring Gulf states. And that could be, in some instances, extremely damaging, particularly the desalination plants. So where do you think we are with this, and how does this play out?
Right. Piers, I agree with your framing, except for one small detail. It's all the same war. The Strait of Hormuz, the attack on our Gulf allies by the Iranians, the conventional attacks by the U.S. and Israel and Iran, it's all the same conflict. They're just different tools being used by different actors in that same conflict, and of course, they're all related. And now we're almost 2 months into this thing, and what do we know
never
for
mind.
sure?
Okay,
well, we know a couple of things. We know that
I thought he was saying that, sorry. I've heard other people say, because I feel like I've heard Trump give that excuse. I think we saw that yesterday, where they try to say like, oh, well, we've been at war for, well, they say 47 years, but people try to tie these two conflicts together, or the two attacks on a year ago, and then the current whatever the fuck we're at now. Yeah.
Trump administration's theory of the case, which is that this would be a short war, regime change, a Venezuela type agreement with whoever was left standing was wrong. They had for whatever reason, either they were misled or misled themselves, got into this with completely wrong expectations about how the Iranians would react, what their capabilities would be. And the way that we know this is because President Trump says it all the time. He's admitted on several occasions. He was shocked that the Iranians would close the strait. He was shocked that they would attack our Gulf allies. Now, one could say that if he hadn't taken all of the people in the U.S. government with any expertise in Iran or negotiations out of the loop, that he might have been more aware of that, but that's a separate story. But to get to your question directly, where we are is nowhere. We're at a stalemate. And by highlighting what the Iranians are saying and what the Trump people are saying, you can see that there's a huge gap there. And the reason that there's a gap is because both sides right now believe that they have the advantage. And they've got a blockade, and we're blockading their blockade for some reason. And they both have incentives to not return to major combat operations, but they also both have incentives to keep, this thing going on and see if their leverage can increase. And, the sort of day-to-day craziness of the Trump Truth Social posts, where he's threatening to, wipe out a civilization one day and then threatening to destroy all the power plants, which, by the way, would be a war crime in another post, and then saying everything's great. And the market manipulations. I mean, you're quoting poly market. I mean, the corruption in the poly market, not to mention the futures market, is unprecedented.
When this came out, so this came out yesterday, I think this came out before the article that came out that said that a soldier was being prosecuted by the DOJ for $400,000 of bets that he placed on Polymarket that he probably shouldn't have been able to. That was kind of insider trading.
And in that kind of a crazy situation, a delicate, agreement with the Iranians over serious issues that require a lot of nuance and a lot of hard negotiating, basically impossible, both because of the chaos on their side, which is real, and the chaos on the U.S. side, which is real and obvious. So that's a really bad situation. And any country you go to, any diplomat you talk to in any part of the world will tell you the same thing, that the entire world is suffering because of the craziness of the Trump team and the intransigence of the Iranians. It's not that one is blamed or the other is blamed. They both have a responsibility for getting.
Wasn't it 400 million? No, it was like 400K. 400 million. That'd be crazy.
Into this mess, and nobody has a plan for getting out. So I think this is going to be, at best, a medium boil conflict for the foreseeable future, well into the summer, and at worst, a return to major combat operations that will cost American and Iranian lives especially.
May I buttress his point? Because I do want to add something to what he said, and I agree entirely with your analysis here. There's a story out today in the Financial Times, the FT, where they go in depth into the 34 Iranian vessels. It's part of their so-called shadow fleet that were able to circumvent the U.S. blockade on Iranian vessels. And as an American, of course, you're supposed to be on American side. You're supposed to be rooting for what America's doing. But it's incredibly hard to do that when you see how much of an economic struggle this is imposing on countries all around the world. In the very beginning of this war, Trump actually lifted sanctions on Iranian oil because he wanted to ensure that the supply of oil wasn't going to be as limited as predicted. And then when he saw that they were unwilling to play ball with the Strait of Hormuz, Trump decided to kind of have a bit of a tantrum and engage in this U.S. blockade of the Iranian vessels. But Iran is able to circumvent, I guess, to some extent. And that is a good thing because we do need more supply on the global market in order to try to keep, gas prices down to some extent. But Lufthansa, one of these major European airline companies, just announced that they have just completely canceled tens of thousands.
You know what? Hot take. Good. I think there needs to be some pain. Oh, fuck, hold on. Don't clip me. Whoa, sorry, hold on. Whoa. I'm not saying that that it's good for things to get blown up or things to be expensive. But, there should be cost associated with war. And this idea of us being able to do, free wars that, we should be able to go to war and there's, no economic pain felt anywhere and it's just kind of like business as usual. I think it's kind of weird that people are attaching absolutely zero consequence to war on our side, right? So we can blow up and bomb and kill so many different people and fuck with so many other countries and fuck with so many leaderships and assassinate people, whatever else. But as long as the oil prices are the same, we're good. It's I don't know, it rings as a little hollow to me. I think. Yeah, designer wars, yeah.
Thousands of flights in order to reserve fuel. They're running out of jet fuel. So this is, the longer this goes on, the worse this is going to be.
Yeah, that's my sense. Tom Sauer, you're more bullish, I think, about the war from an American perspective. Explain why.
Yeah, I think everyone else on the panel here, point well taken. I understand, like, there's some real concern there. But I think it's important to step back, is to take a look at the fact that why are we here in the first place where we are? And that is to prevent Iran from obtaining or building nuclear weapons. Now, and also I fully understand the argument that we've been told for the past 10 years that Iran is 2 weeks away from having a nuclear weapon, right? I get that. For what it's worth, though, is that obviously I would assume that the national security apparatus, folks at Pentagon, White House, and whatnot, many of whom I'm personal friends with, obviously they can't share information with me that they're not allowed to share. But I'm going to go on the assumption that they have more information than I do. Now, whether that means they're actually close to getting enriched uranium, or whether that means more importantly, that they're building up their
former U.S. Navy commander and mine specialist. We have an intelligence community, and we had the director of that intelligence community go before Congress and say that they did not make the determination that Iran was imminently threatening the United States with acquiring a nuclear weapon. So I don't know why he's acting like, well, maybe they've got top secret information that we just don't know about. No, that was never communicated to Congress. I don't believe they have that information. Like, that just seems to not be true at all, but okay.
Conventional defenses to such a point that we would have exceptionally more difficulty in eliminating a nuclear threat from them if we continue to let them build up those conventional defenses, right? So I guess what it comes down to is, imagine if we did have a Iran with a nuclear capability, just a warhead, but also miniaturized to the point where it could be mounted on a missile, right? And keep in mind, consider this, like North Korea has nuclear weapons. We allowed them to do that. That was probably a mistake on our part. And because of that, nobody messes with them, right? They usually like to be left alone. They're very smart. As much as everyone loves to talk about how terrible and dumb and crazy North Koreans are, they're real smart, but they act more like a crime family, right? So, and then let's take a look at another country that had a WMD program, Libya, right? And then, about a decade or so ago, Gaddafi decided to willingly give up his nuclear program. And how did that work out for him? Yeah, he got sodomized on the hood of a pickup truck with a bayonet. That's what happened to him. So what did he, so what is the lesson that we have taught a lot of these other countries? Is the best thing you can do to ensure your security and survival is to have nuclear weapons. So they've made that an existential objective for them. And now imagine if you did have a nuclear armed Iran that was able to harass other people in the neighborhood, that was able to control shipping in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. And it really makes it very difficult to take military action against them, especially when they have openly said again and again that they would like to use those nuclear weapons. Okay, but
Tom, let me ask you a question. If the key thing is removing their ability to build a nuclear weapon, we know they've got enriched uranium to over 60%. We know it's buried away. No one's quite sure where it is. And we know at the moment it remains buried away. How does America get its hands on that enriched uranium? Because it seems to me if it doesn't provably remove it and destroy it, then the Iranians are still where they were. When the war started, they've still got exactly the same capability they had 6 weeks ago. So how do we get that without a ground force invasion?
Hang on.
Without a ground force invasion, well, I'd say with great difficulty. And here's something, without saying too much, is one thing I do know, and you can probably find this open source, actually I know you can, is that there are parts of the military that have been working this very problem for a very long time, well-funded, with a lot of technology, specifically in what we call sub-T, subterranean. And
okay, I haven't followed these stories closely at all, but is there a chance that one, when we lost the pilots or whatever, and that plane crash, whatever bullshit, that wasn't a pilot doing random things, but that we did send in a team to try to retrieve the nuclear material, and that operation just completely fucking failed? I got that email that is in my brain, where like if a year or two goes by and we don't ever see that pilot that they rescued receive like a Medal of Honor or the president's award or some bullshit, whatever the fuck the president awards people. I think those are for civilians actually. That like why hasn't the president been on camera with this guy or taking pictures of him? Like it feels like they show off every single good accomplishment or achievement from the military or the FBI or anything else, right? Like, yeah, I don't know. Destiny, that would have leaked already. Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
And specifically working the problem set of what would we have to do in order to access subterranean facilities in Iran or North Korea? So without saying too much, there's something that I was involved in. There are two things that I spent a lot of time in the military in was mine countermeasures, C-mines as a Navy EOD officer, and also weapons of mass destruction. So I do have a little bit of knowledge. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot I think I can say, but I would not be surprised, and this might be an extreme option, and again, I have no special knowledge of plans of the administration, but I think that possibly us conducting a very heavy, prolonged raid to get that might be on the table of us. I know it sounds crazy. I'm not talking about an occupation force or anything like that.
Yeah,
sure, it does, but that might work.
Okay, hang on, Donald, speaker once.
Hang on.
Clay, I'll come to you in a moment, but Josh, you wanted just to rebut that, I think, quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to rebut in that, but let's start with the premise that we had to attack Iran just in case we could imagine a world in which we couldn't attack Iran, which is a pretty circular logic, not to mention a completely unjustified reason for attacking a sovereign nation in any circumstance. And I don't blame people who make that argument. This is the only one the Trump administration has even offered up. There's the only possible explanation is, other than the Israelis dragged us into it, which they've backed off from, the only other one they have is, oh, well, someday we weren't going to be able to attack Iran, so we better attack them before we can't attack them. And that has nothing to do with international law. And what lesson does that tell the rest of the world? What message and signal does that send to Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping or Kim Jong-un, who would love to attack a country on a flimsy justification, but now there's nothing that we could really say about it because we just attacked. So that's one thing. The second thing is your question of how do we get at that nuclear dust that Trump keeps talking about, if that's even possible. Well, there's only one way, and that's through diplomacy and a negotiation. And if anyone thinks that anyone would be stupid enough to send American men and women into some subterranean dungeon, which is heavily guarded by Iran's most elite forces, to drag 1,000 canisters of highly volatile nuclear material while having some sort of firefight. Like, I don't know what you're smoking or what movie you're watching, but that's not a real thing, despite the fact that, yes, some plan exists in some special forces vault somewhere. That's not a good idea. Let's pray that doesn't happen.
Anna laughing along while she thinks that IDF special forces could have gone in and killed every single Hamas agent. Yeah.
It's not going to go well. So if we want to have a nuclear agreement with Iran, we have to have a nuclear agreement with Iran. And that's the only path out of this. And that's why it's so shocking and so terrible that our diplomatic engagement is so obviously incompetent, because if it switches every day, then it's obvious that,
Okay, let me bring Clay in. Clay, just on a political thing, because I heard people on the Trump side yesterday talking about the economic damage the blockade is clearly causing Iran. And if that was to carry on, then whatever reserves they may have very quickly get swallowed up. It gets very expensive for them, very punitive for them. I get all that. But at the same time, the same thing is happening to the US. There's a constant reports now of depleted weaponry on the US military side. A lot of stuff's being used in the last 6 weeks. There's clearly a lot of economic pain. You're seeing gas prices rising significantly. You're going to have food prices rising because of the block on fertilizer coming through the Strait of Hormuz. We haven't seen that come through yet into the food chain, but it will. And all this with the backdrop of the midterm elections.
Asking in earnest, are you not concerned that Tulsi Gabbard's anti-Western bias would motivate her to undersell the IC's threat assessment of Iran? As an agent, yeah, for sure. As like a team leader or maybe like the department head of something, maybe it gets a lot harder at that point. But as like the director of national intelligence, as being the head of all of that, no, I don't think she could just lie about that. There's so many different. Isn't it like 13 or 15 fucking intelligence agencies that are all sit underneath that? I don't think she could lie like that, no.
It just seems politically very perilous the longer this goes on for Donald Trump. And he keeps trying to say it's going to end, it's going to last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks. Well, we're now into the 7th week. There's no sign of it ending at all. As somebody that would like the Republicans to do well in the midterms in November, how concerned are you getting about the timeline here and the economic and political damage that is being sustained by America?
I'm very concerned. Look, the number one thing that people say everywhere is they're angry about the cost of goods. That is what I hear everywhere. I got 3 boys. Every time I go through the Chick-fil-A here in Nashville, where I live, it's over $50. Things cost way more than they should. I think it's probably something that everybody on this panel can agree with. And there's anger. And there's anger at everyone in power as a result, because, again, it just comes back to everything costs more. And so when gas, which was actually one of the things that would become more affordable, was under $3 a gallon, people felt better. Now that it's over $4, people get angry. Here's what I would say, Piers. President Trump is not actually making short-term calculations here. I believe really in his heart, President Trump has been angry at Iran for 40 years over the way that this government has treated our country. And I think that he sees in the 1990s what happened with North Korea. I bet if you got Bill Clinton on right now, Piers, and you asked him, okay, other than the blowjob from an intern in the Oval Office, what do you regret the most from your tenure in the 1990s? I bet he would say letting North Korea get a nuclear weapon, because it was eminently rational of a crazy regime to get it. And once you have a nuclear weapon, as you just heard, I think most people would agree here too, you can't do anything to the party that is in control of a country that has a nuclear weapon. Ask Ukraine. They gave it up. And I think that's why Russia invaded them. I don't think they would have ever invaded if Ukraine had kept their nukes. Okay. So it's eminently rational for Iran to pursue nuclear weapons. And I believe it's also eminently rational for us to try to keep those nuclear weapons from being there. Now, this isn't a choice, though, that's being made for the next 6 months. It's a choice that's being made in Trump's mind for the next 20 years. And here's where people are going to disagree with me. Here's how I see this ending, Piers. I don't see any solution other than President Trump wants to prove this is not Iraq. This is not a futile multi-trillion-dollar loss of financial might for the United States, not to mention thousands of lost lives. And for what? It's not Afghanistan. And for what? I think President Trump wants the nuclear dust, as he calls it, in the possession of the United States to prove, unlike the war with Iraq that George W. Bush led us all astray in, this is one where there were weapons of mass destruction, and we went and we seized them. Now, that is a cinematic ending for a president who has a cinematic scope of how stories like these should go. I think that's ultimately the resolution. And here, let me throw a little wrinkle in here. I think there's an element of the Iranian leadership right now that might be willing to have that happen, but cannot say it publicly, because if they do, they're going to get killed. So how do we somehow nudge agreement, maybe from people in control of Iran that want to be in power, but know if they're seen as facilitating this sort of act, they're going to get killed. They're going to end up like Gaddafi. I think that's one of the really difficult aspects here that everyone is trying to resolve. Who's in power? How do they stay in power? Can we find a Delcy Rodriguez-like figure in Iran that we can work with better than the past? That's my sort of overall overarching take, Piers.
No, so you might be right. We don't know, right? There's a lot of rhetoric and counter-rhetoric and a lot of bullshit going on, frankly. And Anna, just coming back to this, we haven't mentioned Israel yet. And there's still this ongoing debate, which Trump furiously denied a few days ago, that he was railroaded into this by the Israelis. But clearly, from what Marco Rubio said very early on, America got involved because the Israelis presented a plan which could involve the immediate taking out of the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, and a lot of top people. But then they laid out a plan, according to the New York Times, that would then follow that, where you'd have the collapse of the IRGC, the people would rise up, there would be a regime change in the realist terms, and the Strait of Hormuz would be an irrelevance. Everyone would be too busy to notice it. None of the rest of that plan has materialized. What do we feel about the Israeli part of this? Because we haven't discussed it. And the Israelis, I don't think they really care whether there's chaos in Iran. But I do think the Americans care.
You're right in that assessment. And, as much as I trust the gentlemen on the panel when they say that they're concerned about nuclear material that's in the possession of the Iranians, the fact of the matter is
Israel having a nuclear weapon. People keep saying this. Well, Israel's had a nuclear weapon for probably around 55 years, right? Nobody's gotten nuked yet, despite them fighting wars with everybody. So, well, I guess in the past 50 years. Well, no, Lebanon and everything else. Yeah.
This war, for the Israelis at least, was never really about their so-called fear of Iran's nuclear material or nuclear weapons, because Israel itself is a nuclear power and, in fact, have threatened to use their nukes on multiple occasions. The traitor to the United States, Jonathan Pollard.
Wait, but you would, just because you're a nuclear power, you'd still be worried about them getting nuclear weapons. I mean, what? Okay.
Has suggested on 2 different occasions that Israel should use its nuclear weapons. But what Israel wants more than anything is a similar situation to that of Syria, where there is chaos. It's a complete and utter disaster in Syria, but they're no longer worried about Bashar al-Assad and his alliance with the Iranians. Now they want to get rid of the Iranian regime, but that has proven to be a lot more difficult. And in fact, there really are.
Israel has threatened to use its nukes. I don't know if there was ever like a formal threat, but I think they got real close to it in 73, part of the Yom Kippur War. Like, they were discussing it, I believe, internally amongst themselves. I don't know if they ever formally, told the U.S., we might have to nuke a motherfucker.
Are no signs that is going to happen. I mean, when you really think about so many different elements of Iran as a country, right? I think Trump doesn't understand Iranian culture. So when he issues these insane threats of wiping out their civilization or bombing their civilian infrastructure, that only hardens the Iranians. That doesn't scare them at all. And he should learn that lesson by now, because he's broadcasting that he intends to do these, war crimes, and he's getting nothing from that other than people giving him the side eye or condemning him pretty aggressively. What Israel wants is to be able to do what they're doing right now in Lebanon. They want to expand their borders, what they've already done in Syria, expand their borders without any challenge from Iran or its proxy groups.
Keep in mind, and again, as a Western fucking whatever, you want to criticize Israel for this, but Israel wants to expand their borders, in Syria. Why did they take the Golan Heights? Because they were getting attacked from there all the time. Israel wants to expand their borders to the Litani or whatever in Lebanon. Why? Because Hezbollah is rocketing them all the time from there. Where has Israel not expanded its borders? Into Jordan. Why not? Where has Israel not expanded its borders? Into Egypt. Why not? Just saying. You always give them an excuse.
Which is why it's important for the Trump administration to understand, as much as they think that this is about nuclear material or even ballistic missiles, for the Israelis, it's not. That was always the cover story. They want regime change or they want a failed state.
Right. Tom Sauer, I want to play a clip of Donald Trump talking about the Vietnam War, which he claimed he would have sorted very quickly. Let's take a listen.
It will end. When it's over, they want it to be over immediately. And I just looked at a little chart. World War I, 4 years and 3 months. World War II, 6 years. Korean War, 3 years. Vietnam, 19 years. Iraq, 8 years. I'm 5 months. Okay, 5 months. I would have won Vietnam
in 2
very
days,
quickly. I would have, if I were president.
I think the parallel is quite interesting, because of course the Vietnam War started with just a few hundred Marines being sent over to deal with something very quickly and come back, and then became a quagmire which America couldn't get itself out of for a very long time, and with enormous cost, particularly on military life. There is a danger here. I mean, depending on what route Donald Trump takes, but were he to start committing troops on the ground, you could see a parallel with something like Vietnam if he's not very, very careful, because I think the Iranians have infinite patience. Right? I don't think they've got any intention.
Nobody has infinite patience. That's not true.
They're giving up their enriched uranium, and they absolutely have to. And at the moment, I don't think there's enough pressure on them to do that.
Well, I think we'll see. But one of the things that I noticed you pointed out that, it started with a few hundred troops and then it grew, which it absolutely did. And I think what Clay mentioned is some way for us to obtain it. I think that Clay
Seems like some pundits overstate Israel's influence over the U.S. and obsess over the evil Jews. It also seems like sometimes you take the opposite perspective by default. Is that because usually people criticizing Israel are doing it from a bad faith position? I don't think I take the opposite perspective. Like, every country tries to influence the United States. I think we have had a historically close relationship with Israel. So obviously they try to influence us more than others. I think that the current war in Iran, just from the reading, even before that article came out, is probably because Israel really wants us to do it. But the thing is that people have pretended that like every single Israeli or every single war in the Middle East has been like the Israel secretly controlling the government and secretly having Jews everywhere that are maneuvering everything in place. Like, it's sometimes the difference is a little more subtle. Like, I don't think that we're in war right now with Iran because of Zog, because we're a Zionist occupied government, or because of crazy, weird Jewish control over everything. I think Trump is just a fucking retard. Yeah. Destiny, Syria hasn't done anything. Don't fucking run cover for the Israeli land grabs in Syria. The Syrian people have been at war for 15 years and have finally freed themselves of the tyrant Assad, and now Israel is stealing land from them, and the Syrians aren't even shooting back at the fucking Israelis. You sound real mad, my dude. I'm talking about the Golan Heights that Israel got after the 67 war. I don't know what Israel's taken recently. If they've taken stuff recently, I don't know why. Probably not good, but I have no idea what I haven't followed anything recently once the Assad regime fell, and yeah.
Kind of alluded to what I was saying earlier is, look, when I made this suggestion, again, this is a capability that we've been working on for a while. And that doesn't mean a small little raid. Yeah, there might be a decent sized footprint to get it out. But I think, otherwise just using diplomacy, you don't have any leverage or any threat. You're really just begging. So it really just does come down to getting the enriched uranium out of the country. And that's it. So I don't really see any situation where we would have any sort of a continued presence in Iran or boots on the ground for an occupying force or anything like that. I don't think anybody is seriously considering that. It is Iran is a very large mountainous country with like 90 million people. And they have a, pretty robust domestic army in the area. So I don't think anyone's really suggesting that. But I think that we do need to get, one way or another, we should get that nuclear material out. And I agree with Clay that is one of the ways we can do that now. And there very well might be, because we don't really know who is in charge of Iran. We don't, right? It might just be the IRGC. And there might be certain elements that, if you remember when we took out Soleimani, right? What did they do? They had to respond. They had to show face. But what did they do? They just threw a couple missiles that landed into an empty field. So that really very well could be a possibility. But one way or another, yeah, it could be done. It would take, a large footprint. Well, when I say large footprint, I mean hundreds of troops.
Has there ever been another notable example in U.S. history of another nation pulling the U.S. in such a strong direction that wasn't an enemy? I guess the U.K. in World War II, after the Lusitania was sunk and German U-boats sinking U.S. trade vessels. I mean, arguably, the whole reason why we installed the Shah in Iran in 47? What year was it? Was because of the leadership in Iran. Was it 53? The leadership in Iran was going to take British Petroleum, I think was the name of the company, right? They were going to nationalize it and basically take it all from the Brits. And I think the Brits came crawling to us and cried and said that we needed to intervene and get rid of their leadership there. And we supported the Shah and we basically couped them and everything. Yeah. At Destiny, you spent a year researching Israeli history, so now anytime anything relevant happens, you just mumble something about the 6-day war and say you don't know if they're justified today or not. So somebody asked about, we were talking about prior land grabs or whatever. So obviously the 6-day war is the big relevant thing for prior land grabs, okay? When I say I don't know if things are justified today or not, it's because I haven't read about them. I'm giving you the honest answer. I know that you really want me to take the opposite position and just like knee-jerk Israel bad, or you want me to think, or you assume that my prior position was just everything Israel does is good, so you want me to take that position so you can fight against it, but I don't know what you want me to say, buddy. Suck a dick.
Would eventually leave with tons of air cover while they dig it out and get it out one way or another. And again, it's a problem we've been working for a while, and you'd be actually pretty surprised at some of the things that we can do. So, okay. I don't think we're looking at a Vietnam situation ever.
I am curious.
Let me ask all of you.
There's...
It's just, hang on one second.
Hang on.
Just want to end by asking all of you, actually, just to very quickly summarize how you think it'll play out. So let's go to the Josh Rogan prediction market. What do you think is going to happen here?
Well, first of all, I predict that both the prediction markets and the futures markets will continue to be corrupted by inside traders who are making money off of the ups and downs of Trump's machinations and utterances regarding the war. Second, I predict that, Trump will not be foolish enough to do a full land invasion of Iran, because that's a crazy thing to do.
Hopefully.
Third, I predict that this will be a stalemate that will go on for a long time, and that will crush not only the U.S. economy, every economy in the world, Piers. There's the Koreans, the Japanese, they're all paying 30% more for energy. European jet fuels. This is a disaster, not just for America, but for the world. And I predict that Trump doesn't have a clear way out. And the only way out, which is actual serious negotiations, he doesn't seem to be willing to do in any sustained way. And that's not a happy prediction, but it's also not based on sort of any corrupt prediction markets, and it's not based on any interest in trying to spin this as some sort of, best effort to get at a hard problem. It's not. It's a really incompetent, really misguided effort to get at a hard problem, and that hard problem is likely to persist.
Clay Travis, how do you see this playing out? What's your best bet of what we're going to witness?
I think we seize the nuclear dust, and as sort of a wink, wink, nod, nod behind the scene agreement, we unfreeze the Iranian assets as a part of doing that. Iran has to open back up its economy. The Strait of Hormuz opens back up. I think that all happens within the next month. And so I am somewhat optimistic that rational actors here will end up reaching a rational conclusion, even if Iran doesn't acknowledge agreeing to it publicly, and even if the United States doesn't acknowledge agreeing to it publicly either. What Iran wants is unfrozen assets and the ability to sell product. What we want is the nuclear dust and an open Strait of Hormuz. I think that's where we're going to end up.
Okay, Anna, finally you. What would you say?
Let me just say, I've been vibing with Josh for sure. Josh seems to know what's going on, and I agree wholeheartedly. The one thing I'll just add is this whole notion of going in and getting the nuclear dust, as Trump likes to call it. This is something that Benjamin Netanyahu has been fear-mongering about for literally decades, dating back to the 1980s. So I think the IDF should go in and get the nuclear dust. I think that's their job. I don't think we should risk the lives of our American soldiers in doing that
You definitely don't want that, but okay.
operation.
Well, we will mean to see what happens if there is any attack by ground forces. I think it would be an extremely dangerous escalation if that were to happen. And once that kind of thing happens, very, very hard to control.
Do you actually need to take the dust, or can you just blow it up? Does it does that matter?
What then follows? So I think the Iranians remain pretty heavily armed. They've got a lot of ballistic missiles, a lot of stuff they have buried away, a lot of forces. It's dangerous. And I would not be comfortable, I have to say, seeing British forces committed to that on the ground. And I'm not sure many Americans would be comfortable seeing American forces. So maybe Anna's suggestion is right. They'll go in, but they'll come from Israel, which would be quite an interesting development. Thank you very much. I'm going to say, one of the more civilized panel debates I think we've ever had on Uncensored. I want to thank you all. We should have you stuff for posterity.
Wow.
But I appreciate the tenor of that debate. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Piers. Thanks so much.
2 weeks ago, the UK government banned Kanye West from entering the country because of his anti-Semitic outbursts. The decision sparked a debate about Britain's weakness on freedom of speech. Many people accuse the government of inconsistency. People like the racist influencer Valentina Gomez are allowed in, they argued, so why not Kanye? It's possible. And in fact, likely, the government had no idea who she was until this point was made. And this week, they duly announced that Valentina Gomez has indeed been banned from entering the UK. The Colombia-born American patriot was hoping to attend a Tommy Robinson rally in London next month, but we're going to have to watch it on social media. Rules ahead of the curve. I actually banned Valentina Gomez from the show back in December. Let's take a reminder.
Here's my pitch to you. If it turns out the people of Texas, a state that I love and have spent a lot of time in, if it turns out they're all as bigoted as you are, then you'll win. And if you win, I'll get you back on Uncensored. But here's the deal. If you lose, you're never coming back.
Ooh.
Well, less than 24 hours after Gomez appeared on the show, President Trump endorsed her rival, and she duly lost the primary by staggering 49 points, one of the biggest beatings in American political history. But given that she's been all over the newspapers back home in the UK, I've decided to comply with Valentina Gomez's personal request that we temporarily lift her ban and have her back on Uncensored. The official ride on the coattails of the very reasonable Brits don't understand free speech argument. I've also invited a Brit who was kicked out of the United States for his speech. So joining me now is the Colombian-American activist and anti-Islam influencer Valentina Gomez and the journalist and MD of International Interest, Sami Hamdi. Well, welcome to both of you. Valentina Gomez, why do you think it was unfair that you were barred entry to the United Kingdom?
Good morning, Piers. So good to see you again. Where are your manners, Piers? You're supposed to introduce me correctly. Come on, I'll give you a second chance for you to introduce me once again.
As what?
As the most beautiful and truthful conservative you'll ever meet. Piers, great to see you. Since you don't have the decency to do it, I'll do it myself. Good morning to all of my English lads. I'll be looking forward to meeting each one of you on May 16th at the United Kingdom rally with Tommy Robinson.
All right, Piers, can you answer the question? Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere.
I'm getting there. And yes, Piers, you said it last time on your show. If I lost my election, I wouldn't be back. But never say never, Piers. And believe it or not, Piers, you're my favorite brick. And Piers. So I cannot wait to hop on a boat, swim across the English Channel, meet Shabana.
Are you able to answer the question, or are we just going to go around the house?
She's going to bring me some fish and chips, and we're going to have an amazing time.
Right. Just once again, you obviously didn't hear me, or maybe you didn't understand it, but just for simplicity, why do you think it was unfair that you were banned entry to the United Kingdom?
Piers, because I speak the truth, the same reason why the Bible is banned in every Muslim nation. And Piers, if you come after my First Amendment, I can assure you I'm going to use my Second Amendment, Piers Morgan, because that's the beauty about the First Amendment. Whether you disagree with it, we have to protect it at all costs. Just like when your wife goes online and asks to be, I would say, accommodated by pool boys, since you already know what's going on with that.
Is that a real thing? Did that happen with his wife?
Okay, are you making some weird threat involving guns? I can't really keep up with what you're saying.
Absolutely not. I'm saying I speak the truth. I'm saying that I want every rapist and pedophile behind bars and publicly executed. I'm saying I want every terrorist dead. And I'm saying also that every Muslim should start respecting Christian nations and maybe hopefully go back to their 56 Muslim nations, Piers Morgan.
Your reaction when the British Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, banned you from coming in for this rally because of the incendiary, bigoted comments that you've been on the record as saying, was that you called her a dirty Pakistani Muslim and said, I'm coming to England on a boat. Obviously, that is grotesquely offensive, racist, bigoted, and vile. But also, there's a point I'd like to make to you, is that Shabana Mahmood was born in Birmingham in England. She's as English as I am. You, however, were born in Colombia. You weren't born in the United States. So I would argue that Shabana Mahmood has much more validity to be considered English than you do to be an American.
Piers Morgan, she's from Pakistan. You're an actual British, and let's talk about Pakistan.
She was born in
for a
Birmingham,
second.
in the middle of England.
Her parents are from Pakistan. Let's not.
Yeah, she was born in Birmingham, in England. She was born in England.
She's from
English
Pakistan.
Citizen.
Her parents are from Pakistan. And Piers Morgan, the Pakistan is not known for being the cleanest place on earth. It's actually a dirty shithole full of terrorists. I've never heard anybody say that they want to go to Pakistan for vacation.
Christ.
Okay, let me bring in our other guest because you're obviously intent on being
It was a joke posted by his wife on an Instagram caption saying "Pool boy wanted."
as disgusting as possible, which is your modus operandi. That's why nobody voted for you, by the way. But it doesn't really interest me what happens with your political
Thousands of people
aspirations.
voted for me.
Wait. I don't know if somebody said this in chat and I missed it. She's not the one who did the ad where she shot the straw man in the chair or whatever, is she? She? Okay, yeah. Was it in Texas? What was her? Oh, fuck. Why? I don't understand how Google searches YouTube better than YouTube searches YouTube, but okay.
A provocative clip
This person.
shared on X shows Gomez,
Real
a
voice,
Colombian
real voice,
American
real
and
voice,
ardent
real
supporter.
voice. I'll show the video. Whatever. Okay.
Years.
Sammy, well, you lost by one of the biggest thrashings in American political history. So the voters voted with their own votes. Sammy Hamdi, let me bring you in here. You were detained in America by ICE officers for 2 weeks while on a speaking tour. They alleged that you supported terrorism and posed a threat to national security. They said, we said it before, we'll say it again, the United States has no obligation to host foreigners who support terrorism and actively undermine the safety of Americans. Now, you were later allowed to go back to the UK after 2 weeks. But what was your reaction to being barred entry and then being, well, allowed in, but being held in detention and then sent back?
This was her ad.
It's that simple.
Valentina Gomez said this should happen to illegal.
Okay, it's not the whole ad. I don't know why. Okay. Stop. No more links from chat.
Thank you very much, Piers, for having me. I think, to be honest, the climate in America at the time, you could almost sense that something was coming. My particular case slightly differs from Valentina in that, for me, it was a particularly targeted attack. There was a lady called Laura Loomer online who was going after those who were advocating for Palestine. So they went after American Muslims for Palestine in Michigan.
Laura Loomer is fucking crazy.
The judge ruled in favor of the American Muslims for Palestine, American citizens. They went after them in Nevada. The judge ruled that they have freedom of speech. They went after Mehdi Hassan and his naturalization. They failed there. They went after Mahmoud Khalid and the green card, and they failed. The judge ruled that Mahmoud Khalid is allowed to stay. So they went after student visas, Rumaysa Ozturk and Muhsin Mahdawi in Colombia. They failed there. And then there was sort of, we need to find something because the judges are ruling against us. And the video appeared of me speaking in Kuala Lumpur, in which I was telling an audience that we should speak freely in these democracies because with this freedom, as people are hearing the message, as they're hearing the message of the humanization of the Palestinians, people are changing their minds. Tucker Carlson is changing his mind. Candace Owens is changing her mind. Dave Smith is changing his mind. And that's why we don't need the violence. We can speak freely, democratically, and use those freedoms to change their opinions. We can use our words and show the images and show the videos. Laura Loomer took this video, her and Senator Ted Cruz and an individual called Dinesh D'Souza, and they openly came on Twitter and said, we need to go after this British lecturer who's giving lectures in Stanford, in Berkeley, in CUNY, all these other places. We need to get rid of them. So this was on a Monday. I saw that tweet. So I was sort of expecting it. And the reason I was only there for 2 weeks as opposed to 6 months, like some other people, is because the friends of mine at the State Department, I'm a risk consultant, I've advised the State Department on a few occasions, they came out and said this was a misunderstanding, we'll clear the record, just go back to the UK, apply for a new visa, and you can come back to America. So my situation is slightly different, but my reaction was, there is this Israel First lobby that's deeply concerned with the shift in American public opinion. How can we scare people into not talking about Palestine, to stop them from speaking about it? Because as you can see in the Gallup poll, now more Americans sympathize with the Palestinians than they do with the Israelis. And the point I make here about Valentina is, you mentioned it, Piers, yourself, that the language of hate didn't resonate with voters. And we saw it that the language of hope is what's resonating. Mamdani speaking about how we should all stand together for humanity and think about the basic needs of the ordinary American, and he wins. Abdul
All right,
Sayyid
let me jump in. Let me jump in,
Go ahead.
just to stop you in mid-flow. But the reason that was cited for you not being allowed into the United States was comments that you made on October the 18th, 2023, so just after October the 7th had happened, at a London mosque, and this was cited by the Department of Homeland Security in America, where you said, celebrate the victory. We are pitying a people who brought a huge victory since 1948. Don't pity them. They don't want your pity. Celebrate the victory. And you then asked the crowd, when you got the news that it happened, how many of you felt the euphoria? Now you said
weird. That's a little
taking
weird.
He's like a
kind
terrorist,
of.
Piers. He celebrates terrorist
Can you-
attacks.
let
What
me-
do you expect from somebody like that?
I mean, if you could wait, please. Sammy, just you said you were taking out of context. Explain how you were taking out of context.
So, Piers, that particular video, the reason why, I mean, I know what the Department of Homeland Security was saying. In the courts, this was not mentioned at all. The charge sheet only said overstayed the visa because of a revocation. But this particular point that you mentioned, the reason the video was never presented is because it's a doctored video of 5 different clips with 20 minutes between each clip. And when something similar happened to Donald Trump, a BBC director ended up being sacked. The point here being is what is allegedly said in the video that they were claiming wasn't actually being said, which is why 2 federal judges, while I was in ICE, ruled that there were signs that my freedom of speech had been violated and that I had a case to present at the federal courts, which is why when the government came to negotiate to say, would you like to go home?
Wait, what's the original video for this guy? I'm curious. Was it actually taken out of context, or was he saying... Fuck, what's this guy's name? I see the Valentina Gomez thing. I'm gonna be real, I have no idea who he is. We're at 105.35.
Valentina Gomez and the journalist and MD of International Interest, Sami Hamdi. Well, welcome to...
Sami Hamdi celebrates October 7th, I guess, or what?
Joe, President Trump has landed in Tokyo. Yep. He will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea on Thursday. That is going to be a crucial Palestinian encampment at the University of Sydney, where he told the crowd that Israel was a rabid Zionist project and wants to eradicate Palestine. And so this person who came to Australia last year has just been detained in the United States. Joe, this is a worry, isn't it, when the US are treating this so seriously, but he's already spoken to Australian uni students. Yeah.
Using a DHS site. Oh, boy.
Netanyahu did not envisage that for the first time since 1948, the Palestinians would actually retake land back from the Israelis. Netanyahu did not envisage that for the first time since 1948, the Palestinians would be able to hold those territories for more than 72 hours.
We are pitying a people who brought a huge victory since 1948. Don't pity them. They don't want your pity. Celebrate the victory. Allah has shown the world that no normalization can erase the Palestinian cause. When everybody thought it was finished, it's roaring. How many of you feel it in your hearts when you got the news that it happened? How many of you felt the euphoria? Allah Akbar. How many of you felt it? Why did you feel it? Because the despair vanished. You said this ummah is alive.
Netanyahu did not envisage that.
Okay, doesn't sound that good, but maybe.
Comments that you made on October.
The American, and he wins. Abdul
All right, well, let me jump in. Let me jump in just to stop you in mid-flow. But the reason that was cited for you not being allowed into the United States, I understand that distinction, but I'm just curious about. We've got the audio that goes with these comments you made, so let's take a listen, and then I just want you to explain why it was out of context.
Oh.
Netanyahu did not envisage that for the first time since 1948, the Palestinians would actually retake land back from the Israelis. Netanyahu did not envisage that for the first time since 1948, the Palestinians would be able to hold those territories for more than 72 hours.
We are pitying a people who brought a huge victory since 1948. Don't pity them. They don't want your pity. Celebrate the victory. Allah has shown the world that no normalization can erase the Palestinian cause. When everybody thought it was finished, it's roaring. How many of you feel it in your hearts when you got the news that it happened? How many of you felt the euphoria? Allah Akbar. How many of you felt it?
All right.
Why did you feel it? Because it despair vanished.
Can he save it?
You said this ummah is alive.
Can he save it?
So, Sami Hamdi, just to be clear, what was the lack of context?
He can do it.
So in the talk, I described how prior to October 7th, the Saudis were about to normalize with the Israelis. Netanyahu held a map at the United Nations of his future for the Middle East, and there was no Palestine on that map. Israel had subsumed and consumed all of the Palestinians. In the talk, I described how Bloomberg were now publishing articles saying that people are realizing you can't normalize over the heads of the Palestinians. You have to engage them in any discussion regarding a peace. That now the Saudis were no longer going to normalize with the Israelis without a Palestinian state, as the Saudi Crown Prince had suggested. And as a result, when you're seeing all of these headlines, celebrate that victory that the Palestinians will no longer be trampled. That now everybody's going to include them in any future talks. That it's been demonstrated you can't walk over them and do a peace without consulting them or including them in it. And that's why everybody should celebrate that the Palestinians are back, the Palestinians are involved in what's being discussed, because people are realizing just as you couldn't force the African Americans to abide by slavery, now you're realizing that injustice will result in these incidents. The only way to stop it is to engage the Palestinians. And now everybody is talking to them. That's the victory. But on no account, Piers, in that talk, in even the clips.
But when you got the news that it happened, how many of you felt the euphoria? What did you mean by that?
That the Palestinians
let's be know about something. Let's clear something up.
Can you be quiet, please?
The best thing about it is that we just need to bump everything.
I'm asking Sami Hamdi to provide the context.
Go ahead, Sammy.
When you got the news that the Palestinians were not going to take normalization lying down, that the Palestinians were still there, that they weren't being discarded from the table, when you got the news that the Palestinians were taking action, and bear in mind, at that point, there was still no news of civilian deaths, there were no news of the different atrocities that were committed, that the Palestinians still have a foothold in this, and therefore people should celebrate and say that the Palestinians
Hang on. This was October the 23rd. This is 2 weeks after October the 7th. So everybody knew about all the civilian casualties. We knew that 1,200 people had been murdered. We knew that 7,000 more had been wounded. So when you talk about people hearing the news with euphoria, that would have been said on a day where there was full knowledge of exactly who had been killed.
Not exactly, Piers, because at that time, if you remember, guests were coming on, there was a conflicting of news. It wasn't clear how many had been killed. It wasn't clear who killed them. It wasn't clear if it was Hannibal directive. It wasn't clear if the testimonies by Israelis that the Israeli forces had.
Now, if Piers, I don't know how well Piers knows the conflict, but killer question would be, how many do you think today were Hannibal directive? Just curious.
Killed them. All of that was unclear. But the reality is that all civilian deaths are condemnable.
No, I'm sorry. I can't. I'm sorry, Sammy. I can't accept.
You missed it. Go back. You missed what? When he said 2 weeks later? Oh, did you see her sign? Oh, no, I didn't.
Who had been pieces. For the 23rd, this is 2 weeks after October the 7th. So everybody knew about all the civilian casualties. We knew that 1,200.
What? This is such an Instagram influencer. Oh, God. Okay.
100 people had been murdered. We knew that 7,000 more had been wounded. So when you talk about people hearing the news with euphoria, that would have been said on a day where there was full knowledge of exactly who had been killed.
Not exactly, Piers, because at that time, if you remember, guests were coming on, there was a conflicting of news. It wasn't clear how many had been killed. It wasn't clear who killed them. It wasn't clear if it was Hannibal directive. It wasn't clear if the testimonies by Israelis that the Israeli forces had killed them. All of that was unclear. But the reality is that all civilian deaths are condemnable.
No, I'm sorry. I can't. I'm sorry, Sammy. I can't accept that. I'm sorry. It was crystal clear. I was covering it every day at the time.
Finally.
Sorry, no. Can you please wait? Can you please wait? No, Sammy, just to be clear. I mean, I was on air every day pretty much after October the 7th. We are talking 16 days later. You said this. We knew how many people had been killed, and we knew how they'd been killed. So I'm just curious why you would use the phrase euphoria. How many of you felt the euphoria when by then we knew that there had been a massacre of predominantly civilian people in Israel?
Piers, at the time in which October 7th was taking place, there was the belief that the Palestinian cause was dead, that it was finished, that the reality was that the Palestinian voice did not matter anymore, that on the table, the ones who would decide their future would be those who were about to erase them, that Israel was going to go to annex Gaza, that they were annexing the West Bank, that the pogroms were taking place, and that the world quite simply didn't care, that at the United Nations, it was being pushed that Palestine would no longer exist in the future, and the Arab leaders were about to go along with this as well. The Saudi ambassador and UAE ambassadors were going to West Bank, and they were being stoned by the Palestinians who were saying, you're about to sell us out. And no matter how much people kept saying to the Brits and...
I usually do photos after events, Canadian, yeah.
to the Americans and to Europe that this is an injustice of epic proportions, that you're about to let the Israelis ethnically cleanse an entire territory, and you're about to reckon, and you're not willing to take any action whatsoever. There was this sense of despair, Piers, that no international law resolution was being implemented, that the United Nations was futile. The point I'm making here, Piers, if you allow me just to finish this point.
To be clear, did you feel personally a sense of euphoria after October the 7th?
I just felt euphoria that
when I saw that the Palestinians were still there, that the Palestinians were not going to be rolled over. It is true that many people were happy that at least the Palestinians could still take a stand. When they saw the civilian casualties, their hearts were broken, because this is not the way of Muslims. Muslims shouldn't be killing civilians. We don't celebrate that. We have in our tradition that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when he sent one of his generals to a tribe and he found out civilians had been killed in the campaign, he turned to the sky and said, Allahumma inni abra'u ilayka mimma fa'ala Khalid. Allah, I'm innocent of what this general has done. I'm innocent of the death of civilians that have been caused. In other words, the act under international law by which a Palestinian tries to take back his territory is enshrined in international law. But the death of the civilians...
The problem I have with it is the timeline, right? This is the 23rd of October, you said this. It's 16 days after October the 7th. Everybody knew what had happened by then. And I'm just curious, whether do you now regret saying, when you got the news that it happened, how many of you felt the euphoria? Do you regret saying that?
Piers, what I regret is the death of civilians. What I regret is the bloodshed. What I regret is the theft of land. What I regret is ethnic cleansing. What I regret is that for centuries, Jews, Muslims and Christians lived side by side in Andalusia, Sarajevo and Jerusalem. What I regret is that we lived together and married into each other and built families together.
Do you regret asking that crowd on October the 23rd, when you got the news that it happened, October the 7th, how many of you felt the euphoria? Do you wish you hadn't phrased it like that now?
I wish, Piers, this is what I regret. I wish that there were other avenues available for the Palestinians in order to secure a statehood and recognition of their state. I regret, Piers. I regret the bloodshed being shed. That euphoria that I described is not a euphoria of bloodshed. That euphoria I described was in a sentiment at the time in which the Palestinians would not be rolled over. That's all I'm talking about. I don't celebrate war. I don't celebrate the spilling of bloodshed. No one has a euphoria when they see blood being spilled. The euphoria is that people are talking about the Palestinians. Piers, they're being kicked out of their homes, Piers. They're being slaughtered in cold blood. Piers, even before October 7th, there's 780,000 people kicked out of their homes just because of some project that didn't want people living together. Piers, the despair is real, Piers. Piers, these are innocent kids being killed. Sidra with her legs blown off. The euphoria was that the Palestinians won't die. The euphoria is not in the killing of a Jew or a Christian. When we come from a legacy where the Ottoman Sultan sent boats to bring the Jews from Andalusia when Isabella was slaughtering them, that after the Holocaust, Piers, the Jews came to Palestine and said to them, please don't do to us what the Europeans did.
All right,
I know the heritage I come from. Piers, just on this final point, Piers, nothing in that Brexit video, nothing in that whole speech, which was for 2 hours long, endorses the death of civilians. It's not the way of the Muslims. Rather, what I was arguing, and what I still argue, is give the Palestinians their humanity. Put them on the table. Don't steamroll them. Don't go over their heads just because you want to take their land. Respect international law. Respect the United Nations. Give them their land back. Give them their nation back. And let's go back to living side by side the way that we did for centuries as the people of God.
Okay, let me bring in Valentina Gomez to respond to that.
Finally, Piers, what a boatload of crap that was, honestly. Just straight up ranting nonstop. Exactly what Muslims do. Just try to confuse you, blow up, and just yell nonstop. Piers, let's be honest. Muslims are a threat to national security. That's why Christians in Nigeria are being slaughtered by Muslims.
Do you know how many Muslims there are in the world?
No, I don't need to know.
2 billion?
Well, have a guess. How many Muslims do you think there are in the world?
Way too many, Piers. I prefer one dog over 100 million Muslims.
Okay.
Jesus Christ! She's just a rage baiter.
Yeah, that's a disgusting, offensive, and vile thing to say. It's very much on
What?
brand for you. But how many
What?
Muslims? How many
They
Muslims
like
are
to
there in
rape
the world?
goats. They like to rape little girls. That's normal.
Yeah, how many Muslims are there? How many Muslims are there in the world?
I don't know, Piers. That's not something I care about. How many Christians are in the world?
Have a
Piers?
guess. Have a guess.
Have a guess on how many Christians are in the world.
She has no idea.
I'd like you.
She's not
I'm
even
asking
gonna
the
guess.
questions. How many Muslims
She
would
has
you
no
think there are
clue.
in the world?
I already said way too many, 1 billion. And they have 56 Muslim nations.
How many-
They should go there and live in the
How many?
56
How many?
Muslim nations
How many?
very happily amongst each other.
You
and
describe.
under
You
Sharia
describe.
law.
You describe all Muslims. You describe all Muslims because you're disgustingly Islamophobic. You describe all Muslims in the most disgusting manner. You call them a bunch of killers and rapists and so on. I'm just asking you a simple
what they do.
question to put
I'm
these
just stating what they
views
do,
into
Piers.
context. Do you know how
Piers.
many people you're talking about?
Piers, I do not rape and I do not kill and I do not steal. That's
Good
something
job.
How many Muslims are there in the world?
A plus.
I already told
You
you,
say they
way
all
too
do
many.
this. How many? How many? How many?
I already told you way too many, Piers. Just like they have taken over
You
the
have no
UK,
idea,
they've
have you?
taken over
You have no
Texas.
idea
I
how
don't
many
need to know.
people you are
Because-
branding
because
rapists
how
and killers.
many
You don't know, do you?
rapes
She doesn't
You
even
don't
need to
care.
know.
You don't care.
Queen,
You don't care, do
who
you?
cares?
Yeah, you don't care how many there are. You don't care the context of your
How
vast
many
comments.
girls have been raped by the Muslim rape gangs?
Piers,
Go ahead,
can
answer
I
my question,
fix this point,
Piers.
Piers?
Are you going to try?
No, I'm talking
Are
to
you going to
Piers
try
right
and compare?
now. How many girls have been
Okay.
raped by the Muslim rape gangs? Just
Piers,
like Mohammed raped
the,
6-year-old
the,
Ask the
Aisha.
question to
the
Valentina.
grooming gang.
No, I'm not
The
here
grooming
to argue
scandal
on
was
this
an
topic,
utter.
Piers.
The grooming scandal was an utter disgrace, and the perpetrators were finally brought to justice way
No.
longer than they should have been, and they were imprisoned for their disgusting actions. And what happened
That's not
there
true.
was a repulsive. There was a repulsive failure by our justice system to bring these people to account.
Watch
However,
the Sam Harris Bench Pro combo out? No, but I got a 60-minute thing loaded up.
However, I am asking you, because you brand all Muslims with the same way that you brand the people that committed the grooming gang scandal. You brand all Muslims the same way, but you have no idea how many Muslims there are. There are nearly 2 billion Muslims in
That's
this
a lot.
world.
Damn.
And what you're doing when
She's
you talk
about to be
about them as a
pro-nuclear
community of
strikes on the
people
whole world.
is
Let's say
you're
it's
tarring
1
all
to 2 billion Muslims.
You're tarring
Piers
all
Morgan.
2
Yeah,
billion.
that's still
All
too
2
many.
billion. You are tarring. Let me finish. You are tarring all 2 billion people with the same brush of being killers and rapists and so on. To which I say to you, that is the purest personification of vile bigotry, racism, and Islamophobia. Why don't you focus on people
Piers,
of all religions
they follow a
who commit
book
heinous
that calls
crimes?
for the murder of Jews, Christians, Hindus, and infidels just because we don't bow down to their stupid rock, Piers Morgan. We don't do that in Christianity. In Christianity, if you want to be an atheist, if you want to worship a cow, if you want to worship a table, you're allowed to do that without getting killed. Because right now in Egypt, a 30-year-old man is being held in prison because he's about to get murdered by the government of Egypt because he is no longer a Muslim. He is now a
Piers,
Christian.
it's just not true.
And
Piers,
when
if you don't mind, can I say something here,
call-
Piers? Piers, if you don't mind, can I say
Yes, I'll bring in Sammy Hamdi to respond, yeah.
Piers, I
George
just-
Hutch versus Justical? Did Hutch and Justical actually talk, or was he just Hutch reacting to stuff?
Oh, no, so she keeps talking about the idea. She keeps talking about this idea of rapists and the like. Piers, I went to the website of the Office for National Statistics and the Bureau of Justice of the Americans, and here you can see these are all the victims saying who their perpetrators are. And here they say that it's people that they know, it's their family members, it's their friends, it's their acquaintances. Only the small number over here is done by strangers or what she calls grooming gangs. You can see the overwhelming majority are done by those that they know or those
Man,
of
we
their
all brought our pieces of paper today, huh?
relatives. Nobody says this is white Christian sexual epidemic. If you look at the population, she says that they're being taken over. This is the population of Muslims in the UK and in the US. In the US, 1.1%. In the UK, 6%. Tell me, where is the takeover that's taking place here? Piers, when you look at the crimes that are committed against Brits, and I'm a Brit, I'm born and raised here, against our sisters and our daughters and the like, here are the crimes committed by Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris. Nobody says this is white Christian rape. No one says this is a white Christian problem. Everybody says crime has no faith and it has no race. This was committed by vile individuals and justice should be delivered. Piers, when you look at the Office of National Statistics and you see the number of people incarcerated incarcerated in the UK, you can see that they are overwhelmingly white. But nobody says that this country has a white criminal problem. No one says that this is a Christian problem. Everybody says this is a criminal problem by vile people because crime has no faith and crime has no race. Piers, when you look at the mass shootings in America that kill students and kill their children, this is the data from the Bureau of Justice in America. This is by white shooters, this is by ethnic minorities. No one says that in America they have a white Christian shooting problem because they know crime has no faith, they know crime has no race, and they know that it is individuals who need to be brought to justice. The reality
let me ask you this question, Sami Hamdi. Let me ask you, Sami Hamdi. Sami Hamdi, I understand the point you're making. It doesn't in any way, it doesn't in any way excuse the appalling way that the grooming gang scandal was handled, or the failure of our justice system to bring those perpetrators who were almost exclusively in that scandal case. They were British Pakistani men. It doesn't excuse any of that. But you make a point about the totality of statistics. My question for Sami Hamdi is about Valentina Gomez. Would you have allowed her into the UK?
Piers, part of me believes that it would have been good for Valentina to come and see the real Britain. The Britain that belongs to the family that I am in. The English blood that runs through my kids from Stenning, Brighton. It would have been good for her to come and meet the wonderful giants of Britain who are Muslim, like Timothy Winter in Cambridge, like Paul Williams, like Paul Keeler, like Suhail Hanif. It would have been good for her to see the realities of what Britain is like and how Muslims live in Britain and contribute to society. Because when Tucker Carlson finally saw it, instead of regurgitating the hate that he was doing in 2001, Tucker Carlson came out and said, I was wrong and I didn't know that Muslims love Jesus too and they believe in the second coming. When Candace finally got to see the reality, she came out and said that I was disgusted with myself for not looking in further. I believe Valentina is still young. She's in the early stages of what Tucker Carlson was. I'm asking her, skip the years that it takes to figure it out. Go and see what the world looks like. Go and see the reality, because your message of hate didn't work. Abdul Sayed, the Senate candidate for Michigan, a right-winger, turned up in his rally and told him, I'm here as a right-winger. Abdul Sayed put his hand on his heart and said that I am so glad you're here. I'm so glad we can talk with one another. I'm so glad that we're standing together. Marjorie Taylor Greene says this is no longer a battle between left and right. This is a battle for America first. And the final point, Piers, I'll finish on this. Valentina's brother serves in US forces. That Valentina, instead of focusing on the 1% of American Muslims who aren't the problem in America, perhaps she should focus on the 42 million Americans living on SNAP who can't afford basic groceries. She should focus on the servicemen who return to America and sit in the freezing cold and Magnificent Mile in Chicago. She should focus on those ordinary Americans going bankrupt as a result of medical bills. There's a reason she was rejected in Texas, because no one resonates with that hate. There's a reason why she was rejected in Texas, because no one buys the hate anymore. What wins in America, what wins in the UK, the reason Reform lost in Gorton and Denton is because Zach Polanski came with a message of hope. In America, Mamdani came with a message of hope. And even Donald Trump, even Donald Trump, before the message of Iran, even Donald Trump, when he won the election, declared that he had established the biggest coalition of Muslims and Arab Americans.
We've run out of time. I just want to say, Sami Hamdi, that's enough, please. I would simply say to Valentina Gomez that sometimes when people show themselves, you should believe them when they show you. And your reaction to the English-born Home Secretary of my country, Shabana Mahmood, who's a diligent, hard-working, intelligent, decent person born in Birmingham in the Midlands of my country, your reaction to her calling her a dirty Pakistani Muslim was one of the most disgusting things I've seen or heard in a very long time. And it showed you for what you are. You are a disgusting, Islamophobic bigot that hates 2 billion people on this planet simply because of their religion.
They hate me too.
And shame on you.
They hate people like me. They hate people like you. They hate people like your wife.
You're only back. You're only back on this program. You're only back on this program because you were banned from my country. I say good on you, Home Secretary. You're a more decent person than Valentina Gomez could ever dream of being.
I wouldn't be
I'm going to leave it there. Thank you both very much for your